Thank you. We'll start out with a question for, we'll start with Dr. Patterson. We have a lot of Marxist, communist countries around the world. Could you explain a little bit, by definition, what their attitude is towards religion in general and religious minorities in particular?
Thank you. Amazingly, despite the fall of the Soviet Union and the West's victory at the end of the Cold War, there are a number of communist countries left around the world, the largest, of course, being China, but we have practitioners of that in Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba, and elsewhere. And these governments practice a form of secular materialism that what it really privileges is allegiance of the citizens, or better, subjects, to the state's ideology, to its demagoguery, leadership, and the like. And so religious people are often seen as lacking allegiance because Christians, Muslims, Jews, and other religious people have a higher authority that they worship and that they hold to. So this is why China cracks down on Uyghurs, Falun Gong,
Right.
Christians.
Are you, I'm sorry, I only have
Sure.
5 minutes. Are you aware, are you allowed to be a member of the Communist Party if you're not an atheist?
What we've seen in the past, there have been religious people who've been in the lower levels of the Communist Party, but under President Xi, what we've seen is a great hardening within the party. No senior official is going to be a publicly observant person of faith.
Okay. Dr. Mobbs, the Biden administration has been treating U.S. foreign aid as a global platform from which to implement overseas a rigidly progressive ideological agenda to counter some nations' religious beliefs. In March, Secretary of State Blinken repudiated the prior administration's elevation of religious freedom as a U.S. priority, declaring there's no hierarchy that makes some rights more important than others, and placed religious freedom as a co-equal to progressive policies. Could you elaborate on the historical context and the policies that were in place under the prior administration?
I think the critical point here, Mr. Chairman, is that we have to get back to having that as a standalone right. Religious freedom, as its standalone right, has a bipartisan and historical consensus in the community. And unfortunately, what's happened is that has been taken away and brought to what my colleague said here, on par with domestic policies and the exportation of ideological beliefs. And what we need to do is re-centralize individual religious freedom as that central and historical right to ensure that we can export a values-based approach unrelated to domestic ideology.
Okay. Could you, there's sometimes some concern, both in Central America and Eastern Europe, that America is not necessarily favorable to certain religious beliefs. Could you comment on that a little bit? Is that a concern? Are we kind of sticking our nose in other countries as far as how they should handle their religious beliefs?
I think what you may be referencing is what looks like the exportation, again, of our domestic belief systems, flying the pride flag over our embassies in certain countries, like Hungary is an example that occurred last year, in which these nation states felt as though we were imposing upon them our domestic belief system, rather than just flying our nation's flag. And so, yes, I do think there has been evidence, as evidenced by the Prime Minister of Hungary, explicitly stating that they felt that was the case.
Okay, so kind of a hostility to the United States because of our anti-Christian kind of worldview.
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Curry, your organization, Global Christian Relief, is working diligently to assist persecuted Christians in Nigeria. Can you give us just a quick overview of what's going on to Christians there, really quick?
The persecution of Christians and moderate Muslims is driven by extremist groups there, Boko Haram, ISIS in that region, and the Fulani, which have typically been seen as a tribal group, but also have a shared ideology. They have a dogma, and the Fulani, who are often sort of positioned as arguing over land, really are telling the government, when their public statements, that they're attacking these Christian villages because of their faith. So there's a unified extremism there.
Thank you. Dr. Mobbs, one more time. I'd like you to focus a little bit on Central America, maybe the Caribbean. Has the U.S. at all weighed in there on domestic policies that may affect what they view our Christian laws?
Mr. Chairman, I don't feel qualified to answer that question.
Okay. Dr. Patterson?
The answer to that, sir, is yes. In a number of instances, perhaps the most famous one was a leaked memo from the U.S. Embassy in a Central American country saying that the U.S. government wanted to push as much as possible in the direction of a candidate that was pro-abortion and other things rather than the candidate who ultimately won in that election. So there is a sense in many of these highly religious societies that when it comes to matters of life and family, that the United States is eroding their national positions.
Okay, yeah, I think I had one congressman tell me that a representative from one of those countries felt that every time they foreign aid was conditioned on behaviors in those countries that made their country less Christian. Okay, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. Want to just broadly just start by saying